lead. She says a huge amount has been done already, but for many, the nightmare continues.
The government will work hard to make sure that, there is permanent, let's say, accommodation, but that's going to take time because of the scale of what we've seen. So there are people who are still displaced away from their homes. They don't have any homes to return to. People don't know what's coming next.
And finally for now, if you thought the change in time overnight was confusing, people in Lebanon are living in 2 different time zones after a dispute over daylight savings. The government decided the change in time should come into force at the end of Ramadan on April 21st, which would allow Muslims to break their fast an hour earlier. However, many institutions like schools, businesses and TV stations have ignored that decision and accepted daylight savings today. And that's your news update at 2:02.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Cheer on the runners at the London Marathon with Ryanair's daily low-fare flights.
Generally dry and bright today with well-scattered showers developing in the afternoon. Top temperatures ranging from 8 to 13 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.
Now then, you're welcome along Sunday papers. I'll run you through the back pages. First of all, glum phases on the back page of the Mail on Sunday. As you might imagine, the Irish women's team yesterday in Cardiff, and the headline is a tough day. No kidding. Greg McWilliams, coach, we've got to learn from this and get better. Beneath that, it was 31-5 if you missed the scoreline. Beneath that, we're going to war for Kenny against France, vows Nathan Collins. Very emotive language from Nathan Collins. So going to war for Stephen Kenny was the way he pitched tomorrow evening. We have more build-up to Ireland-France tomorrow, Stephen Kenny's press conference, and Stephen Kenny has gotten his Ireland team in the mood for tomorrow by showing them various Ireland-France matches from yesteryear, is the back page of The Sun. We have the Sunday World. Stephen Kenny, we can do it. To be fair to him, he's certainly, in his wider comments, absolutely respectful of France and acknowledges they're massively up against it, but he is saying they have a chance. Ireland manager Kenny believes his team can beat France tomorrow to be in a spot to qualify for the Euros. So that's the back page of the Sunday World. We have the Mirror then. It's Nathan Collins again, call to arms, and again it's that Nathan Collins' line about going to war for Stephen Kenny at the Aviva Stadium. Then we have the Sunday Independent. It's a picture from Cardiff yesterday, and the headline is No Way Through. Ireland suffered 26-point defeat in Six Nations opener. And beneath that, Kenny bullish but wary of French threat. And then the Sunday Times, as I slowly but surely find the front page. They give you a selection. They have a picture of Bukayo Saka, and it's Jonathan Northcroft's piece on the craziest Premier League finale ever, and he's got all the stats to back up the argument. They have a picture of Munster losing at home to Glasgow, and then Rory McIlroy, who is in the semi-final of the match play over in Austin at the moment. Brilliant. McIlroy wins on the 18th to win match play semi. So they've 3 pictures in their front page, and beneath that they have Lee Carsley, England under-21 manager. I'm not after Ferguson. Oh, bloody right you're not. I mean, the cheek. So Evan Ferguson not on the English radar, says Lee Carsley. Very happy to say we have Cobh Ramblers manager Shane Keegan here in studio. Good to see you again.
Oh, how are you?
And long time no talk, Mr. Andy McGeady. Great to have you in studio.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, pleasure. I mean, if Lee Carsley was to even think about taking Evan away now, I couldn't take it. And for those of you going, but hang on, he's played for Ireland. What do you mean, would he be on their radar? So this piece by Paul Rowan says, Ferguson almost certain to make his competitive debut against France tomorrow, but technically he could still switch to play for England if he plays 3 or fewer competitive games for Ireland before he reaches the age of 21.
The rules are mad, aren't they?
Does that mean we're hoping he doesn't score 5 tomorrow? Like, just have 3 average games and then do your thing? Is that what we're hoping for?
Look, I know even you were saying it in jest, but it is something that keeps coming up and will keep coming up until he legally is 100% tied to Ireland. I can tell you there has never been any hope, nor is there any hope whatsoever, of Evan Ferguson ever declaring for England. I understand why we're so wary given our previous defections, but no, Evan Ferguson, if you 10-minute conversation with Evan's dad, which I've had on one or two occasions, would make you aware fairly quickly Evan Ferguson won't be heading off to play for England.
Over my dead body.
Well, he doesn't need to go that far, but I mean, man, his bloody employees, his dad is employed by the FAI. Like, you know, he's you know, fully indoctrinated, that's for sure, thankfully.
Yes, okay. Well, it seems we jumped off on Ireland-France tomorrow evening. To give you a sense of what Stephen Kenny is saying here on the front page of the Sunday Independent, he's talking about the Irish approach. France beat the Netherlands 4-0 at Stade de France Friday. So Stephen Kenny said, we don't play in a low block, as it's called. That's not part of the team that we've assembled. We don't want to do that. That's just not what we do. We don't assume that just because a team is superior to us that we inevitably will have much less possession and we'll have to succumb to a situation where we'll just have to defend deep and hopefully get a break or play on the counter. We don't have to do that, is what he's saying. He does add, neither will we fool ourselves into thinking that if we're stringing passes together that we're in the ascendancy, because France can be devastating on the break themselves when they turn the ball over. And I think, Shane, I've several worries about tomorrow night, I have to say, but if you take the Griezmann first goal at the Stade de France Friday, where the Netherlands twice gave it away in their own half, I did find myself saying, it's exactly the kind of goal I could see Ireland giving away. In fact, Ireland did give away that kind of goal, the Doherty pass, the other evening, and they're just going to have to be pragmatic. I'm not saying have no respect for possession, but just be pragmatic.
Cut your cloth to fit your measure kind of very much applies here, so it does. Look, I mean, you know, there is no game plan, short tiki-taka passing or Jack Charlton kick it long and run up the field. There is no game plan selection that Stephen Kenny can go with here that will stop us being remarkable underdogs. No matter which approach he takes, we're going to be massive underdogs. So I suppose his argument will be, well, better stick to my principles and be a big underdog than try and start from scratch all over again. But I do agree with you, and I think no matter what he is saying, I think he is clever enough that there will be a level of pragmatism. To be fair, he's not just talking for the sake of talking. His Dundalk sides were massive underdogs in games in Europe against teams with far superior resources, and did often come away with more possession and that. But that's not going to happen tomorrow night. Like, it's, you know, just the Gulf. You know, I in no way mean to sound overly pessimistic. It's just Stephen Kenny and this Ireland team cannot be judged on how the likes of tomorrow night goes. Okay, I think the Greece Gibraltar ones, they're the ones that he absolutely has to go and win. I'm actually quite happy that they gave Netherlands such a tanking the other night, because at least it gets everybody's mindset into, well, if we get beaten by 4-0 tomorrow night, well, the Hollands, you know, what were we to expect? Of course, that's how it was going to go. But yeah, like the gulf in player quality is as stark. I mean, I've read a couple of pieces. Obviously, we were talking about the Tommy Conlon one already. I was in Paris the night of the Thierry Henry handball. I don't think the gulf between the two sides has been as big as it is in terms of the standard of player in quite a long time, Joe, and that's even taking into account that we have some very promising young players coming through.
Andy, I know you flicked through various pieces looking ahead to the game, looking back on previous Ireland-French matches. What grabbed your fancy?
Yeah, that's the nice thing about a game like this, because when there is that gap, there's only so much you can do in terms of like a tactical analysis or something, because you're kind of hamstrung. France are really good. Ireland are, let's say, developing. But one that did jump out was the Tommy Conlon piece, which is titled, it's in the Sunday Independent, Cry Havoc and Let Slip the Dogs of War. And we've had a number of sort of war cries, and I suppose it's an analogy that we use sparingly and sometimes not great. But this does seem like one of those occasions where you want to say, the guys, lads, you dig in. And Tommy goes back and looks at the 1981 match when Owen Hand was managing, and Ireland, it was the last time Ireland beat France. And it's just a really nice piece. He's obviously gone back to various newspapers of the time, that, you know, from the Press, the Irish Times, and looked at what was read about and talked about at the time. So even the fact that the fixture 42 years ago was also billed in advance by Peter Byrne in the Irish Times as one of Dublin's biggest football occasions in years. That's a nice little echo. tomorrow night. To indicate the scale of interest, Mel Moffat reported in the Irish press that the media section in Lansdowne Road had a capacity for 112 personnel, but the FAI received 220 applications from the written press alone, 54 from France, 12 radio stations and 3 TV networks, this is in 1981, would be broadcasting this live. So it's a lovely way, I think, to look at a fixture and say, what can I do that's a little bit different? And it's really, really good. So I'll just read a little bit from the very end, where Owen Hand was grateful and relieved post-match. I'm off the smokes, he wheezed. If I didn't go back in them during the last 7 minutes, I never will. But it wasn't just the players who deserved a beer or 10 that night. The crowd deserved to wet their whistles too, after roaring themselves hoarse for 90 minutes. I'd buy every one of them a pint, joked Hand, if I had the money. But, says Tommy Conlon, John Delaney was the only man who could ever afford to do that. Lovely call.
Yeah, the last defeat of France.
Yeah, and what I found interesting, Joel, is actually there's two articles in the Sindo today where I've the online subscription as well, and just was bouncing between the two for different reasons as to why I was looking at them. The article in the paper the article online has a picture of the starting team that day. And goes through the names in that team, and for some reason the article in the paper doesn't have it, and I suppose that's nearly what highlighted to me the difference in class. Like, I know that was a very strong France team and you had Platini, but like the Irish team, Kevin Moran, Mark Lawrenson, Ronnie Whelan, Dave O'Leary, Liam Brady, Frank Stapleton, Chris Houghton, Mick Martin. Jeez, this is a good side, this is a good Irish side. I'm sure they were still big underdogs, but that's an impressive looking lineup. So it is. I don't think the gap was as big back then. But it is definitely a very, very good piece that people should get their eyes on. All right.
One other point, and it's right beside that Tommy Conlon piece. Fluke or failing? Why do Ireland concede so many long range goals? So since the beginning of 2021, Ireland have conceded 23 goals, 9 from outside the box, so 39%. This makes us a statistical miracle in some respects. So there was Serbia, that Mitrovic won. There was Luxembourg. People remembered the Rodriguez strike. There was Azerbaijan. There was Armenia in June of 22. Ukraine, June of 22. Armenia, September of 22. Armenia, September of 22. Latvia, March 23. And Latvia, March 23. So freakish, or something which is happening too often to be freakish?
So I'm in my element today, Joe, because I'm beside a fellow stats nerd. So I am, and we've already started the conversation.
Not me.
Not you. No.
So I'm a football man, and my instinct is to say it's a bit freakish. That's all.
Good. I'm yeah. Well, I'm a numbers man, and the numbers definitely back up your gut reply there. Thankfully. This is the other article that's different online. The great thing about the online version is it shows each goal. So it actually, under each of those little paragraphs, you can actually see the goal, which adds another layer to it. Look, I didn't go back through them all. Just had a quick look at the ones from the game again the other night. But my belief is that they're all pretty similar-ish in that XG wise, 0.03 and 0.07 were the XGs for the two Latvia goals the other night. For those who put it fairly simply, that means 3 in every 100 times would that ball have flown into the back of the net, and 7 in every 100 times would the other ball have flown back into the net. And they both did against us. And again, a lot of people will scoff at XG, and I understand that, but there is a basis there for it of tens of thousands of goals that have been analysed. The key thing here for me, Joe, right, is when you're out on a pitch in any sport, a football pitch is a pretty big place, okay? It's a pretty big area. You've only got so many pieces that you can move around that area, okay? You cannot possibly cover out all the zones you want. And as a manager planning for a game, you've got to decide, okay, we really want to zone in on protecting this area, and we know that means giving up this area a little bit more. And it's not ideal, but that's the yin and yang that goes with it. And like, it is impossible, absolutely impossible for Ireland not to concede chances. So which kind of chances? I would be far, far more concerned if Latvia scored 2 goals the other night, from tap-ins in the 6-yard box, or, in XG world, XGs of 0.3 or 0.4 or something like that, rather than the ones that we're looking at. You have to give up a bit of space somewhere. You have to give up a bit of space. And I understand that the article is quite good, and he talks to Dave Henderson, and I understand the point he's making in particular around, he's arguing, was the like of a Glenn Whelan in a team stop teams getting off as many shots from there? But again, we're not conceding a huge volume of shots from those areas. We're genuinely not. Again, I've looked at the numbers. We're not conceding a huge volume of shots from those areas. Just everyone that we do concede from there seems to fly into the back of the net for some reason.
It's a very unsatisfactory explanation.
It's also one of those things where you think about long rangers, they stick in the mind pretty well.
I know. I can still see the Rodriguez Luxembourg.
Yeah. But the point is right. I mean, we're in an environment in football where, because of the analysis that people have done with looking at tens of thousands and more, teams are trying to create chances and opportunities and space in areas that 9 times out of 10, if you go over season, is going to give them the benefit. So it's fascinating to me that Ireland are in this little bit of fluke. So hopefully the other side of this coin might be, we've had our bad run. You know, no long rangers for a while, please.
Feels like we're still in the midst of it, looking at the dates here, though. Gotta be honest.
Not something that's in the distant past by any stretch, is it?
No. I would say, whilst I do think it's largely just freakish, there have been certain occasions where a touch more pressure on the ball was definitely doable.
Agreed. And again, so you were reading a piece from Stephen there where he says we just won't come out in a low block. I understand that, but I would encourage them to come out in a mid block. Like Tommy's piece goes on about, we need to make the first 10-15 minutes blood and thunder and throw everything at them. That can't be chasing the ball around their backline, because they'll just bop it around you, and the next thing they're out the other side and they're through on goal. I do think we need to sit off, not on the edge of our own 18, but I would say I wouldn't be confronting them until the halfway line, because there's just too much quality there, Joe. Like if you could put on the best press and work on it in training all week, and you're trying to box them down the left hand side, you're trying to box them in a particular area, when you've got that much individual quality, they'll get out of a press. Get out of a press, and the next thing you're wide open, and Mbappe does things like he did for the 4th goal Friday night.
Well, even at times on Friday, the 2 French centre halves were put under pressure, and you thought, they're in spot of bother here, the press is good, and then they just put on the afterburners and dribble out themselves, and you're thinking, you've got to be very careful. And as for losing the ball in our own half, as we mentioned, that's an equally scary prospect.
Like you look at the shape, and you would imagine it's likely to stay pretty much 3 centre backs is nailed on. It's really just interesting what he does in front of that. Are we 5-4-1 or are we 5-3-2? But I would think no matter what, you can't have Evan Ferguson tearing headlessly around between the 2 centre halves, and if he does go with 2 up front, well then the full backs are free. So I would say, listen lads, let's give them the first third of the field, and let's let them have however many passes they want up there, and see if they can pick their way through us.
Because I must say, I am increasingly a touch worried. I mean, the November international's just gone, where Ireland gifted Scotland possession in our own box and gifted them big chances. Armenia not switched on for several minutes and just so open. That's less likely against France, because their brilliance will sharpen Irish minds, I'm sure. But even the Doherty pass against Armenia, it's just lax. And his defending at Hampden Park, stopping the cross, was kind of lax.
Absolutely.
And so we're doing lots of good things, but there is this vulnerability about Ireland. There's and even the build up to the first goal the other night, which is O'Dowda, left wing back, finishing off a move between Smallbone and Doherty. So I was saying on Thursday's show, it's like an Antonio Conte dream. It's amazing. But the build up to that, Ireland lose the ball, it's a slide tackle, and that's less likely to happen against a sharper, better French team. Yeah, so I don't know, you watch Ireland at times, and here we are several years into the Kenny era, and there's too much nothing possession, and I think the opposition almost have their arms crossed saying, well, those patterns are nice, but you haven't hurt us at all. And then out of possession, we're sometimes a little bit fragile as well. So I love that this team don't boot the ball away, and I love they've respect for the ball, but I worry other teams, if they're being brutal about Ireland, would say they're a very nice team to play against at the moment. And akin to that Wes to McLean goal away to Austria, that Argentinian goal against France up the right hand side, which is direct passing, sharp, that's hurting a team. That's football. And sometimes I think sometimes golf coaches will say, well, that guy's playing swing golf as opposed to playing golf. Sometimes I think we're playing a bit of swing golf.
Yep. And I think, look, and the last thing in the world I want to do is jump on the overhype train around Evan Ferguson. But just as no matter how good he is, all right, just as his style as a player, he now gives us something a little bit different as well, in that if you're Nathan Collins and you're inside your own 18-yard box, I think Stephen's directive beforehand is lift your head and see can you find Josh Cullen. And that's extremely risky, but something I really enjoy is trying to do. But part of that was out of necessity as well, because Stephen is also thinking, well, you know, for all Troy Parrott's good movement and ability to find pockets, and for all Ogbene or Obafemi's pace, we don't really have somebody that Nathan Collins can clip it out to, who can take it on his chest, set himself, keep the defender away, and then pop it back and let us build from there.
We really, I mean, David McGoldrick's retirement was a real blow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's probably the last decent kind of 9 that we had who could do that. Yeah. Evan Ferguson can do that.
No, it's true. And you can get runners in beyond them, and suddenly we can hurt teams. So that's exciting.
Without a doubt. If Nathan Collins clips that ball out, Evan Ferguson, and look, this is dreamland stuff, but he clips that ball out, Evan Ferguson pulls it down, sets it back to Will Smallbone, and the pace of Ogbene or Obafemi is away. Smallbone looks to slip it through. Like, that's the prototype of the goal I think we need to try and score tomorrow night.
As opposed to knitting together tiki-taka patterns and ripping a team apart. Andy, anything else in the coverage that caught your eye?
Yeah, Shane's got far too enthusiastic there, so I'm going to bring up the...
Are we talking about the World Cup final there, Shane? That goal?
No, just tomorrow night.
Sunday World, Roy Curtis writes about terror when we're talking about facing this France team. Terror spread like a contagion among Irish supporters watching France, fresh from a World Cup final for the ages, summarily execute the Netherlands on Friday night. The Stade de France was reimagined as a medieval torture chamber, thumbscrews affixed to orange-shirted players, while others were stretched and broken on the rack. Ominously, terrifyingly like the clenched fist of a pitiless monster, the 4-goal wrecking ball that flattened the Dutch is swinging towards the Aviva. The whole piece is like that. It kind of sets the scene for abject terror, and then you need Shane to balance this up.
Well, I don't know if I was given as much a chance now. I was just trying to describe a goal that in dreamland we might get, but yeah, look, we're unfortunately Monday nights is a training night in the League of Ireland, unfortunately, Joe, so I won't be there. I know there's no way around it. Listen,
there must be a way around it.
Whatever the best, you can imagine the effort trying to explain to me, a young fella, that he wasn't going to get to see Mbappe in the flesh. But look, it will be a brilliant occasion around the place, but I'd be absolutely stunned if, just to wrap it up, absolutely stunned if we manage to stay anything better than within 2 goals this side. They're just that good.
I would think so. Shane and Andy staying with us, back in 1 second with the paper review.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball. News Talk Breakfast.
Is it time to scrap changing the clocks and stay on summertime all year round?
It doesn't really match how people live, and I suppose back 100 years ago when this was introduced, there wouldn't have been the same amount of artificial light. So, I think we probably have to move on to how people are living now.
News Talk Breakfast with Ciara Kelly and Shane Coleman.
In association with AIR.
Weekday mornings at 7 on News Talk.
What does a Skoda service advisor do anyway?
Oh yeah, why would I tell you when I can explain it through a song?
What do you mean through a song? It's with tune.
A service advisor's very sharp, knows all the Skodas off by heart. If you've any queries to impart,
they'll set your heart at ease.
Free Wi-Fi coffee while you wait, no jargon or red tape. When you come in for a service, it'll be a piece of cake. Piece of cake. Skoda cake.
Book your service at
skodaservice.ie.
With spring coming in, it's time to get out. Get everything you need for cooking and cleaning outdoors with AppliancesDelivered.ie, including the new Ninja all-in-one wood-fire electric grill, smoker and, get this, air fryer. Air fryer indoors. That's so last year. If it's online, it's in stock, with next-day delivery guaranteed across Greater Dublin. Proud part of Expert Electrical. AppliancesDelivered.ie, or visit our store on Main Street, Malahide. See it, buy it, get it tomorrow.
Hi. Did you know that your Irish Life pension could help the planet? By investing less in companies that harm the environment and more in those trying to help it, while always aiming to give you the strongest possible return.
See irishlife.ie for pension funds that have a responsible approach, or speak to your financial broker or advisor. Irish Life Assurance plc is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
I'd pretty much given up on dating apps, to be honest. I had enough of them. But I knew a friend who'd met someone on Go Dating, so I gave it a go. And yeah, it was great. I met someone. It wasn't like instant fireworks or anything, but we ended up chatting for hours, and 8 months later, we're still together.
You never know when you'll find that special someone, but at Go Dating, we'll do all we can to make it happen. Because when you know, you'll know. Sign up today at godating.ie. As loved by News Talk.
This is the Advantage card from On Post Commerce. This saves your business €3 on every parcel you send. This is a way to help your business grow and thrive by cutting your costs and boosting your revenue. This is e-commerce for everyone. Get your Advantage card free at onpost.com today or at your local post office. On Post Commerce. A world closer. Terms and conditions apply.
The Topline annual spring sale is now on. High quality hardware, tools and outdoor products for your home or garden projects. Visit your local Topline store for great products at great prices. Shop our spring sale for 1 week only. Topline, here to help, happy to advise.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now then, you're very welcome back. So we'll update you on the GAA scores in just a few moments' time. The headline news has broken to a slightly shocked Paddy Andrews, who I think thought I was pranking him initially, is that Dublin GAA official just had the tunnel view of the players running out for their game against Louth, and who's there in his boots, shorts, socks, kit bag under his arm with a substitute's jersey on? Stephen Cluxton. Stephen bloody Cluxton. Paddy Andrews. What? Is he? No. So how they kept this quiet, I don't know. Do Stephen Cluxton's family know he's at Croke Park today is one of the burning questions. But Stephen Cluxton is back in the Dublin panel for today at least. If you're looking to me for any information, it's Stephen Cluxton we're talking about. So it's a complete vacuum. Who knows what's going on? But there he is. I mean, this is quite something. McCaffrey, Mannion, Cluxton back.
Are we all in dread again?
I don't know. It's certainly very interesting, but I suppose there's a bit of dread, yeah.
It is. It's a fascinating dynamic. And like you say, I'm just stunned how they kept it under wraps. I find it absolutely amazing.
Amazing. So we'll plough on with the papers. We've been talking Ireland-France largely. Lots of rugby coverage of different varieties. Andy, I know obviously you'd have a very keen eye on the rugby coverage. We'll come to the women's situation in a moment. Ireland beaten 31-5 by Wales. On the men's rugby, both Stephen Jones in the Sunday Times and Charlie Morgan in the Telegraph are, I would say, like a lot of rugby fans maybe, concerned about the yellow red card situation and the havoc it may well play at the World Cup. So he says the action, Stephen Jones that is, the action in green and white last weekend in Dublin was not the problem. It was when red and yellow interrupted the match, everyone had that sinking feeling. Our huge games at the World Cup liable to be wrecked by rugby's protective shield against head trauma, even when the shield is misused, as it was last weekend. And he says that, you know, in the crowd, stone cold red card was one reaction I heard as we waited. Not even a penalty, his neighbour said. And we had that same reaction play out across the week publicly. We had Bernard Jackman on Against the Head saying it's not even a penalty in my view. And we had Brandon Driscoll in this studio outline why he absolutely thinks it's a red, and everything in between. So the point that Stephen Jones makes is that rugby might need to follow Super Rugby here. What they do is when an incident like the steward tackle, for want of a better phrase, happens with Keenan, the yellow card is given, the player goes to the sin bin, and the officials use that 10 minutes for another TMO in the calm of those 10 minutes on his or her own to decide whether that yellow should be upgraded to a red, and if not, it's a yellow and the player still comes back on after the 10 minutes. So instead of Jakob Piper and his assistants with the crowd going ooh when it's replayed again and again on a big screen, just give the yellow, you get on with the game very quickly, and then another TMO will quietly take time, have 10 minutes to consider, maybe make a phone call, who knows, 10 minutes to consider if the yellow should be upgraded to a red, and we might get better decisions. It seems like a very sensible suggestion, works well in Super Rugby. Now, the week that's been would illustrate that even 10 minutes is not enough to have everybody in agreement, but it might increase the odds, I suppose, Andy. This is a no-brainer, no pun intended, goodness me, when we're talking about head trauma and rugby.
Yeah. Now, we're into a young Super Rugby season where they are trialling it. I've seen it run through a few times, including where they had to upgrade it to a red after the review. To me, it's a really, really no-lose, no-regrets move for rugby union. You remove that element of where sometimes we can sort of say, what is he taking so long about? Okay, now the official isn't sitting there wanting to take time. It's just there's a lot of pressure, and between the referee, their assistant referees, and the TMO, they're talking various aspects through, and usually in a language which might not always be clear to us, but it's based in points of rugby law. So it's almost they're talking in their own code at times. And then, of course, for the people in the stadium, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what they're talking about. So the trial as it is works really well. You flash the yellow card. If it seems to be yellow and you're only really talking about yellow versus red, you get that player off the field. You let that person then in the booth, without the crowd, quietly get on with it. And then Stephen Jones has a nice summary here, which the idea in Super Rugby is that an official will be allowed to make a call in silence with no one howling and no one shouting at him. Take your time, yellow confirmed or upgraded to red. Yeah. Now, what they're doing in Super Rugby is that it only gets upgraded to their 20-minute yellow card, the trial that we had on this side of the world as well, and we've ditched it. Charlie Morgan reports that if it does go, it would be a permanent red for the World Cup. They wouldn't be dealing with a 20-minute red. But I think your point is well made, that with the Stuart Keenan decision, maybe they would have landed on yellow, but it absolutely could have been not even a penalty. And there's a source who Charlie Morgan cites liberally, said was involved in the refereeing in this Six Nations, and that source said, with hindsight, the judgment ruled that a yellow card was sufficient, but we need to acknowledge in the Stewart incident it was a very rare scenario. We don't get a decision that could have 3 potential outcomes very often, which I thought was a point very well made, because full disclosure, I was at the game, I was kind of thinking that kind of looks like awkward, but play on, and I could completely see why the red card was given at the same time. But to me, to use your term, no-brainer.
Yeah. The Farrell's family dynamic, the Shakespearean quality of it caught your eye. Paul Kimmage is writing about that, Shane.
Yeah. Well, just the dynamic itself. I'll be honest, it was gas. As I say, I wouldn't be massively immersed in rugby union by any stretch of the imagination, but I did comment last week at home, just in my home house. I just said to my wife, I said that whole Farrell thing, I said, it really, really interests me or fascinates me how that actually works in terms of their conversations with each other. And then I opened the paper today and saw this, so I was really, really interested to see it. I suppose, firstly, like Andy Farrell as a person really, really interests me. I, for whatever reason, I've never overly got sucked in by rugby union, but took madly into rugby league in the late 90s, and particularly I suppose that Wigan Warriors team himself and Radzinski and Jason Robinson and guys like that. And he just struck me as a fella who had leader printed across his forehead from a very, very, very young age. And then I started to hear about the fact that he had a child extremely young. And I think that does feed into all this as well. The fact that there's 16 years between these two people. I've got some very, very good friends who are 16 years either older or younger than me. Do you know what I mean? I think 16 years is not a massive gap. You can be, of very similar thinking and, very, very close friends to somebody who might be 16 years. So that, to me, alters the dynamic almost to a certain extent as well. And I suppose, having read the piece as well, I just don't know how he does it. I genuinely don't know how he does it. The thoughts of, my young fella's into all kinds of sports at the moment. He's into hurling. He is being brought up in a parish different to the parish that I'm from. Could I end up managing my parish against the parish that he now lives in 10 years' time when he's playing senior hurling? Like, what do you say in a team talk? Like, I'm judging by... Remind me who makes the comments to you, Joe, in studio last week. This is how bad I am. Rob Kearney.
It's in advance of kick-off last week at the View Stadium, and Rob Kearney, who played for obviously a number of years with Andy Farrell, part of the setup, I asked him about Farrell versus Farrell, and he said when Andy first came into the squad and we would discuss Owen in team meetings and some of the reviews, there were times when he would step out of the room, and as players we were always very conscious. We'd be talking about Owen and looking around, where's Dad? Rob Kearney continues, fast forward to the 2018 Grand Slam game at Twickenham. We're in the team hotel before the match. Owen comes up on the screen and Andy stops it and goes, when you get your hands on Owen today, and I won't repeat fully what was said Rob, but he said it with such emotion, and everyone in the room just went, wow, if he can talk about his son like that, that's how much this performance means to him. That's how much he wants to win today. And I put it to him, that was the first time you remember him referencing Owen. And Carney says, it was the first time, and what a time to do it, a few hours before a Grand Slam game against England at Twickenham. It was one of those moments where your hair stands up. And I said, previously, you suspected he stepped out of the room, and Carney said he stepped out of the room. It was probably awkward for him. It was awkward for us as players. It was awkward for Joe Schmidt, because Joe would be highlighting some of Owen's weaknesses in front of his dad. It was all just very weird. And then that moment before the Grand Slam game, it was a surreal situation. It really was.
Like, I'm not going to put words in Rob Kearney's mouth, right? But if when you get your hands on Owen, if the information that followed that statement was technical, as in, I don't know, give me the equivalent of showing him onto your weaker foot in soccer or whatever that is in rugby. If the information being given there was technical, well, then I think Rob could have given us the exact words that he said, if that makes sense.
We can safely say it was in keeping with what defence coaches say about what to do when you get your hands on
any other player
number 10
of that kind. Exactly. And that's my point here, is that's extremely, extremely difficult to do, I would think. I'm trying to think ahead to being in his shoes there. I actually, to be honest with you, when I managed our senior hurlers the year before last, I went and spoke to a guy that I was looking to bring in as a selector, and the exact reason he knocked me back was, well, hold on, I could be a selector here for Red Downey Earl. My own young fella is playing for Bursley Cotton. I just can't do it to myself, Shane. And I went, completely understandable. And this is at the lowest, you know what I mean? This is at club standard leash hurling. Multiply this by 1 million for what these two guys are facing into. I don't know how he does it. I really, really don't.
Do you not think, though, that the Farrells, this is all they've ever known? This tough, hard-nosed professionalism. This is life, and this is what you do, and it's very compartmentalised. And smash him, whatever he said, I don't know exactly, but he'll be fine. He's a tough egg, and I'll see him afterwards, and all is fair. And Owen will understand that, and I understand that. This is the world that we've inhabited since our teenage years in both instances. I would think that's how he would see it. If anything, the surprise for me, what I found most fascinating, was the revelation that he would step out of the room previous to that. I would have thought from 2013 he would have been talking about the opposition's son or not, the way he was in 18. That for me was the surprising thing.
I'd wonder, is there something else unmentioned there? Was there a change in the dynamic, not between the Farrells or between Andy Farrell and the Ireland squad, but Andy Farrell's place in the coaching team? Was there a difference there in terms of that dynamic with Joe? That's the question I'd love to ask both sides of that, which is, how come there was this difference? Because if you're an international coach, would you be happy that you've got this source of information about a key opposition player and you can't get that information? You can't. That would, to me, be another side of this whole argument. Because I would view the Farrells as being a very, very unusual family. Okay, in that how many people are 16 years apart playing in the same professional sporting environment at the highest of levels. When you look at Andy's background in rugby league, he's now coaching at the highest level in rugby union, and Owen Farrell, we know what he's done. I would absolutely think that right back to the Saracens era, that's just their environment. It's seen as completely normal in a way that we cannot possibly comprehend.
Yeah, I don't know. I get that, Joe. Yeah, completely. But you still have to utter the words with passion and meaning. Hit my son hard.
No, it's true. It's not.
Hit my son hard. Who says that?
You're not saying show him onto his left.
Yeah.
Who says that?
When you get your hands on Owen,
everything inside you tells you that you hit the person who hits your son. Not that you direct people to hit your son.
Can I offer one little extra here before we leave this? My son beat me 4-0 at chess yesterday. He's 6. If anyone wants to, just hit him really hard for me, I'm kind of okay with that right now.
Yeah. Just one last point on the Six Nations men's rugby that was. Hugh Farley, I think, makes a fair point. Disrespected Schmidt waiting in long grass for Ireland. So he starts off by just charting the extent to which Joe Schmidt, and I think people are aware of this now, Joe Schmidt was very aware of what was being said in the media. He monitored journalist very closely, and Hugh Farrell fell into that bracket, and he remembers publishing a story that Cian Healy was going to miss a Leinster game when Joe was Leinster coach, and it was on the back pages, and he got a phone call from Joe Schmidt that day, angry that this information had found its way onto the pages. "Do you not see how this helps the opposition?" asked Joe Schmidt repeatedly. "Do you not want us to win the game?" Hugh Farrell had to explain that the paper was independent of Leinster. Anyway, they won the game. There was no lasting acrimony, and they had a pretty good relationship. He writes, "Exhaustive media analysis is but one facet of Schmidt's defining attention to detail approach, but it remained an unhelpful obsession and it proved increasingly problematic." So the implication is he will absolutely have noticed the way his legacy has been talked down. Farley thinks it's wrong. Schmidt remains an exceptional coach and an exceptional human being. Now, like Warren Gatland before him, he has plenty of personal motivation to put one over on Irish rugby. Farley calls the revisionism on Schmidt, it's beyond disrespectful, it's obscene, and it could well come back to haunt us. Joe is waiting in the long grass, and he says he may not have been able to escape Ireland's World Cup hex, but 2 European Cups, back-to-back Six Nations titles, Test win in South Africa, Grand Slam, busting 111 years of history by beating New Zealand and then backing it up, makes Schmidt the most successful coach in Irish rugby history. Yet switch on the radio, TV, pick up a paper, scroll your phone for rugby coverage, and you'd swear Joe Schmidt has been a disaster when it compared to the current regime. Consistently hammered. And he says people have short memories. Anytime I have to say I ask a Joe Schmidt question now, I do couch it in Joe Schmidt was amazing, and I mean that very sincerely. However, it's fair to say there have been some improvements in the Farrell era, etc., and on we go, because it does feel like his achievements are overshadowed by 19 in particular and the World Cup failures, and I put 15 down to bad luck. In many ways, the injury situation as much as anything. 19, things fell apart, sure, but the legacy has taken more of a blow than I ever thought when he was sailing off into the sunset.
It's weird. It's as if, because the World Cups are, when we get to this stage, as Ireland have been for the last, I suppose, 3-4 cycles, that's how Ireland coaches are measured. Grand Slams are brilliant. We should not take them for granted. Championships, great. His work with Leinster, brilliant. The very end of the era was not an attractive style of rugby that was being played, and when I read that Hugh Farrell piece, I was like, yes, that's what people are saying, that's what people are remembering. But everything that Andy Farrell has done has been built on this foundation that Joe Schmidt built, and it was a foundation that brought us success like we really have never known at a consistent level. So I read this and I was going, yeah, I'm absolutely saying that, I'm absolutely reading that, I'm absolutely hearing it, and it's not right. Maybe in the rush to praise the current team, I think Farley is kind of getting without coming out and saying it. There's a bit of, we'll stick the knife in now because we didn't have a brilliant time with Joe.
It does imply that, yeah, that there's almost a degree of personally we didn't find him easy to deal with, therefore there's an extra freedom now in castigating his regime.
Little bit. That comes through about 2/3 way through the piece, and just out of the piece you read, actually. And I'm not sure that's fair either, but it is, to my mind, it is inarguable that the sentiment he describes has come through loud and clear, including from players.
But that's the thing. I mean, Andrew Porter, who seems like world's nicest man, even just a couple of weeks ago in conversation with David Walsh, talked about counting the speed bumps on the way to Carton House out of sheer dread, the stress of the environment. Whereas now his fiancée jokes, geez, you can't wait to get away from me to get in there. All of the players, the experienced ones, O'Mahony, Cian Healy, have said it's the most enjoyable environment they've ever been a part of. I mean, you don't want your ex-partner with their new partner to say, this is the most enjoyable relationship I've ever been in. So the implication is clear, and Schmidt will pick up on that. I'd say he's hurt by it. He's more sensitive than he might have let on.
Well, I found it very, very interesting that he does engross himself that much in what's in the media and what's said in the media about him.
Very, very well known in the sector at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a file.
He was fastidious. There were rumours, whether they're true or not, of like a file, and you have a good sense of what each journalist was saying.
Because it's amazing, you see, I suppose, and I suppose you just have to remind yourself that people are just people, because I would have thought, like, I would be like that, I would keep an eye out for all kinds of League of Ireland talk, and at times I'll at times I'll justify it to myself by saying, well, I might pick up, a little bit of information here or there about opposition if I'm keeping an eye on the different podcasts or the different, articles. Now, quite often you're looking to see, well, what are they actually saying about you? Let's be completely honest about. But you look at guys like this and you think, well, they're operating at a different level. They don't care what anybody says about them. In my head, but that's obviously completely not the case. Doesn't matter how high a level you're operating or you are.
It would be interesting to see now if the IRFU comms guys start putting a nice couple of little pieces out there, maybe with interviews, and it's about the long relationship and happy relationship between Irish rugby and New Zealand rugby, and painting Joe in a very positive light. And just again to sort of sow the seeds of don't hurt us, Joe. Don't, please.
Was he overly sensitive to it? Would it have been perceived that he's overly sensitive?
It's hard to know, because publicly he never gave any sense that he was watching things closely.
Okay.
So I don't know if he felt that he was doing it in a very dispassionate, professional way to keep a good feel of the temperature, or if it was that more human, what are they saying about me?
Don't bloody read it if you're going to be overly sensitive about it.
Yeah, we don't know. And
there was the other side of it as well, Joe, where I might get little, if I'm having chats with people, they might say, listen, he reads everything. And he'll then go and ask people behind the scenes to check stuff. And that might be a load of work for them, but it's actually that's not taking a slight at something. It's actually saying objectively, they've written this, is it true?
You want to have a pretty thick neck, Joe. We were preparing for a game last week, so I was listening to an opposition's fans podcast to see if I could pick up some team news. The host repeatedly referred to me as Phil Mitchell.
But was he complimentary with your managerial skills? You can take anything if he said you're a good manager. So that's the men's rugby. The women's rugby, photo on the back page of the Mail. A tough day. McWilliams, we've got to learn from this and get better. 31 points to 5. It was 26-0 at half time. The context here being Wales turned professional just over 14-15 months ago. Ireland more recently, so Wales probably have a year-long head start on Ireland. The gap has widened significantly, it would appear. Ireland up front were dominated completely, a bit better in the second half. The point here is that finishing third in the Six Nations is very important, because there is the World XV competition later in the year, which will be for the top tier countries. You have to finish third or above in the Six Nations to get into that. I think that's unlikely for Ireland. I think they'll be fighting it out for the wooden spoon, frankly, is how they looked yesterday. The coverage is, I'd say, pretty good, Andy, in that it's not shying away from where Irish women's rugby is, but there is an acknowledgement of the wider context as well.
Yeah, and that's the thread which I think goes through a number of pieces here. Hamish Stewart spells it out pretty well up front in the Times piece, both with quotes and descriptions. So this is the first time two essentially fully professional sides had met in a Wales-Ireland's women's game of rugby. And then here's the things they have in common. So both sides had a number in the mid to high 20s of full-time or well-supported players. And that's an interesting phrase. With Wales announcing 25 professional contracts and Ireland including 29 players with professional deals. But then you're looking at, and this is referenced a number of times, where Wales have all of their players based in England in their top flight league, and a good clutch of them, I think it's 7 or 8 at one club.
Gloucester, yeah.
Yeah, you've got Ireland in a completely different place when it comes to that, and that's where you get into sort of, I think, some of the structural questions. Sinead Kassan referenced it in her piece in the Sunday Independent. And then there's a long piece, which is the second of a two-parter by John Cronin. John Cronin is the director of rugby at Railway Union. He's talking about the structure of the women's game in the widest possible degree. And I think that the question that he had in last week's piece, which he repeats here, is, I think, a great starting point from my point of view, which is, how would we organise women's rugby if we didn't have men's rugby? So I think that gets to the heart of, he doesn't mention here, even the fact that a women's Lions tour, is that the right thing, the best thing you could possibly do for the women's rugby game right now? For me, outside, and here I declare my hand, I am not a women's rugby expert, but it seems weird to me to try and do that before addressing some of the other issues in terms of simple equality, for want of a better term, across the game, equality of opportunity, equality of preparation. Okay, So it's really long. There's not really a huge amount I can go into here, because you really are going all over the place. But starting point here was that, and then in terms of the understanding female sport, 90% of female athletes are recreational and sport as part of their lifestyle. 10% are serious and could be the best at any game they pursue. Sport is their lifestyle. He's setting up the piece because he's saying, in order to cater for that 10%. That 10% is going to be the people who play camogie, the people 100%. Who play GAA, the people who play soccer, the people who play rugby. And women's sport is different than men, especially on this island, because the playing pool is smaller. The games are not as developed technically as the men's game that has been going for so much longer at the elite level. Someone like Sarah Rowe can turn their hand to a different sport, and I absolutely accept that turn their hand is actually to completely underplay their talent and what they have to do to get into, which will be a third different elite sport for Sarah Rowe. But that's the pool you're looking at. So when Cronin's looking at this piece, he's saying, if we break it down, who are we targeting? How do we make sure that there's the facilities all over the country? Because not everyone can come to Dublin. So we need to look at how we set up a franchise in 5 major urban areas and probably have 4 in Dublin, and set it up like that. He goes into the funding model. You split in terms of public-private. If you have 100 grand, you'll get 100 grand if you can raise 2. And suddenly, from an 800 grand investment, you get 2.4 million into the game. Now look, all of these things are simply, it's a business plan. That's what we're reading here. Yeah. It's an inspirational one, but certainly I think it's worth reading in the context of what we're seeing going on in the women's game.
They have to have their house in order, Andy, don't they, to have any hope, for exactly that reason. The pool is so small, so much smaller, and then, like, you didn't even name, like, obviously the transfer, like Katie Taylor now has female boxing very much in the limelight, and then go outside the bloody country. In Laois, I think we've lost half a dozen female Gaelic footballers to Aussie rules as well. Like, the battle for the talent that's there is incredible. You have got to have your house in order. You don't stand a chance of attracting a pure sport.
Because we have, I mean, again, the advantage which we always, I think, maybe didn't realise we had in men's sport is probably multiplied in women's. We have people who play loads of sports in the early age. It's a huge technical and injury-proof advantage as they go through later life.
Yeah. He does have the numbers. 188,000 females play Gaelic games in Ireland. 8,000 play rugby. So that's how shallow the pool is. And he does agree with your point on just mimicking what the men's sides do. He says anytime women's rugby's followed men's competition structures, it's hindered us. So he says, let's think blank canvas all the way here and go from there. But regardless, Ireland are behind the curve at the moment in Six Nations terms. And while they'll point to their sevens and say that's in far better shape, which it is, the reality is that the free-to-air games are the 15s aside Six Nations games, which are on TV, and Ireland could lose every one of them this year.
There's a couple of different writers made the point that, lads, even if the sevens players had been playing, they wouldn't have got the ball.
No, they were annihilated up front, actually, is the truth. And there was an 18-year-old thrown in on her debut against a player who I think had several stone on her.
Yep.
So it was chastening, and you can see it in the photographs as they walk off. It's like, oh my God, we're being 26-0 half-time kind of situation, and they're France next. So it's tricky.
It's interesting to see the difference as the Welsh Rugby Union get their structures changed at the EGM of the weekend. I can't remember who it was, so forgive me, but one said it's amazing that they got the women's side of it right while all this mess had been going on in the background in Wales.
Certain irony.
Yes.
Division 4 results, by the way, and we'll update you on the live GAA in just a moment, but Division 4, we have results across the board. London 2-8, Laois 7-6. 7 goals, 6 points in Ruislip. Laois won that game comfortably. Wicklow beat Waterford in Waterford 2-8 to 8 points. And then a crunch game, Sligo 2-11, Leitrim 1-15. So Sligo winners away to Leitrim. All that means is that in Division 4, Sligo and Wicklow have been promoted to Division 3. Half-time between Dublin and Louth, Dublin leading by 5 points to 4 is where we are. I'll update you on the other scores in just a moment. The headline news being that Stephen Cluxton to everybody's surprise, I mean, I'm sure some of his teammates knew, but he jogged out as part of the panel today. So Stephen Cluxton, for today at least, and I presume for the year ahead, is part of the Dublin senior football panel once again. We'll take a short break. Andy and Shane staying with us. Paper review continuing here on Off the Ball.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
This weekend, join News Talk in supporting Childline's Lap and Chat Challenge. You can sign up or donate now by visiting ispcc.ie. Help make a difference in the lives of children and young people. Supported by News Talk.
Planning your next getaway? Take your pick with a choice of 4 routes to Britain and 14 daily sailings with Stena Line. With unlimited luggage, you can pack the car with everything you need. Once on board, relax in one of our stylish lounges, grab a bite in the restaurant, or catch up on some rest in an ensuite cabin. So you're ready for that adventure, wherever it takes you. Book your trip to Britain today from €149 car and driver one way at stenaline.ie. Stena Line, away from the everyday.
InsureMyVan.ie. Hi, I'm Ken Doherty. For all van drivers and business owners, InsureMyVan.ie is Ireland's low-cost van and commercial insurance specialist. For high-quality van and all commercial insurances, call InsureMyVan.ie.
City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
It's a new season of style at Tile Style. See our marvellous marble and herringbone tiles, restful bathrooms in organic tones and textures, and the latest porcelanosa kitchen designs in fresh, modern colour palettes. Let us guide you through the latest design trends to create a cohesive look and feel for your home. It's your new season of style at Tile Style, Ballymount Retail Centre, or at tilestyle.ie.
There's nothing like a full Irish from Dunnes Stores. Rashers, 2 packs for €4. Sausages, 8 for €1. Beautiful bread, toasted and topped with quality butter. Farm fresh eggs, just €1.40 for a half dozen. Dunnes Stores has everything you need for the perfect full Irish. Plus, with our 5 off 25 grocery vouchers, you can save even more. Dunnes Stores, always better value. Terms and conditions apply. Voucher can be used in next in-store grocery shop of €25 or more.
Virgin Media customers, the power to play lies in the palm of your hand. With our best price mobile plan exclusively for you. Add our new free Spirit Unlimited plan to your Virgin broadband for just €20 a month. And enjoy the freedom to move with a 30-day contract. Switch your mobile today. See virginmedia.ie/mobile. Virgin Mobile. It's playtime.
Terms and conditions apply. See virginmedia.ie.
Relax and unwind with a midweek break at the Heritage. Located less than an hour from Dublin, just off the M7 in Killinard, County Laois. Indulge in our signature afternoon tea full of delectable local ingredients. Or retreat to one of Ireland's leading spas with an afternoon of total relaxation. The Heritage is located close to Kildare Village and idyllic walks in the Slieve Bloom Mountains. For the perfect midweek break, visit theheritage.com, part of FBD Hotels and Resorts.
Talking history.
This Sunday on Talking History, we're looking at the history of the Tudors, and we'll be finding out why the most notorious of all English dynasties continues to exert such a hold on the popular imagination.
Talking History with Patrick Gagan.
This Sunday at 7 p.m.
on News Talk. On 106 to 108 FM, on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is News Talk.
It's 3 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Sean O'Regan. The Labour Party is calling for 1 million homes to be delivered in the next 10 years. Ivana Bacik made the call in her first party conference speech as leader, as she hit out at the current government's failing policy. She says Labour would combat the housing crisis by building 50,000 new homes and refurbishing 50,000 existing homes every year for a decade. Deputy Bacik says the government completely lacks the ambition that's needed.
And we know from the government's own Housing Commission that the targets in the Housing for All programme fall far short of what is needed. The government's own targets are about 30,000 homes a year. They can barely meet that. But the Housing Commission tell us that the real need of our population is 50,000 new builds a year.
The United States says there's no reason to change strategy after Russia signed a deal to move nuclear weapons to Belarus. Vladimir Putin says they would stay under Russian control, which would not violate international treaties. 10 aircraft capable of carrying the armaments have reportedly already been moved to the country. Retired British Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell says the Russian president is sending a message by relocating them.
They use intercontinental ballistic missiles, so they're going to be based anywhere. So the fact that they're forward deploying these is actually irrelevant from a military perspective. So this is almost certainly about messaging. It's worth remembering Russia is not doing well in the war in Ukraine.
At least 19 migrants have died in Tunisia after their boat sank. 5 vessels have sunk off the Tunisian coast in the last 4 days after a significant increase in journeys to Italy. It comes as many people flee war in Libya. And finally this hour, at least 26 people have died after a powerful tornado smashed through several southern US states, wrecking buildings and knocking out power. US President Joe Biden has issued an emergency declaration for Mississippi. Alabama and Texas have also been hit by severe storms. Sky's US correspondent Martha Kellner is in the Mississippi town of Rolling Fork, which was in the direct path of the tornado.
This was an extremely violent tornado, bringing winds of around 165 to 200 miles per hour. And in practice, what that meant was that anything in its path was completely pulverised.
And that's your news update, 2 minutes past 3.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. See your Premier League team with daily flights to Liverpool, Manchester and London.
Mainly dry today with spells of sunshine developing through the afternoon. There will be a few well-scattered showers though. Highest temperatures of 8 degrees in the north and 13 degrees in the south. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now, welcome back. So we'll get into Sunday Papers in just a moment again. Sligo and Wicklow promoted from Division 4 is the headline news. I'll update you on where we are elsewhere. Paddy Andrews is at Croke Park for Stephen Cluxton's Dublin against Louth, Paddy. So has that news sunk in, by the way? Cluxton's back in the Dublin panel. Your phone hopping?
The old WhatsApp group is off the charts at the minute. It hasn't seen as much action the last couple of years, so look, it has sunk in a little bit. I'm delighted, and the atmosphere around Croke Park for Dublin fans is exactly the same. It's incredible news for Dublin. On the pitch, 44 minutes gone, it's kind of gone as we expected. It's 8 points to 4 to Dublin. Louth have only scored 2 points from play so far in the game, and that kind of structured defence, Dublin are starting to kind of break that down as we enter into the final quarter of the game. But like I say, that's not really the main story here today, Joe.
No, they have to bring him on, surely.
We were talking about that. Other good news for Dublin is, if that's not enough, Paul Mannion is actually back on the bench as well. He was a late addition for Dublin as well, so I suspect we probably will see both of those guys before the end of the game. Funnily enough, Louth have just had a goal chance there and a brilliant save from David O'Hanlon, so he's definitely putting his hand up to try and keep Stephen Cluxton out of the team. But I think the Dublin supporters, it would be a perfect Sunday if you see both Stephen Cluxton and Paul Mannion back on the pitch for Dublin before the end of the game.
Okay, we'll chat at full time. Paddy Andrews, thanks very much. About 55 minutes gone in that game. Elsewhere in Division 1, the short version is it looks like Galway will join Mayo in the league final, and it looks like after 9 years in Division 1, Monaghan will go down alongside Donegal. Obviously, a lot can change in the next 12 minutes plus out of time, but it's Galway 110, Kerry 12 points. That's in Galway. We have Roscommon beating Donegal. It couldn't get much worse for Donegal, 15 points to 8. We have Tyrone and Armagh 12 points apiece, which could be significant for Monaghan because they do lead Mayo. Mayo 11 points, Monaghan 1-9. So if Tyrone were to do Monaghan a favour and beat Armagh, then suddenly Monaghan would be out of the relegation places. So it is on a knife edge, Division 1. And in Division 2, relegation already settled. Latest there, Clare beating Limerick by 11 points to 3, as we just heard there from Paddy. Dublin ahead against Louth. Kildare 8 points, Meath 3 points, and then Derry are 9 points to 6 up away to Cork. We're going to jump back into the Sunday Papers with Andy McGeady and Shane Keegan. So we've touched on the rugby, we've touched on Ireland-France. Speaking of the GAA, I think you both picked out Mick Foley writing about the league at large. The misery of Donegal is touched upon as well.
Yeah, the Donegal situation at the moment, Joe, just I find absolutely amazing. I suppose it was bad enough having one crisis, but they've managed to have two crises very, very close to each other, but with the first, the senior setup and the academy setup. I had been keeping a very close eye on the academy stuff. Again, it would be an area of overlap with my day job, and I'd be keeping an eye on it. Like, you know, I look at our setup in Laois and what we wouldn't give for either a former star of the county team to come back and say, listen, I'll drive the academy over the next 10 years and I've got some good ideas, or somebody who maybe didn't have a high profile playing career but has a serious academic background and has gone on and done degrees and masters and has that academic background and can fall back on that. Donegal have found themselves in a situation where the one person is both. I mean, it's an absolute dreamland stuff. It's absolute dreamland stuff. How they can go and manage to make a hames of it from there and disenfranchise the person, in Carl Lacey's case here, who seems to have universal backing almost across the county from the players within the academy, from parents within the academy, I'm hearing was a huge part of it as well, and from what were we saying during the week, 40 or so coaches who've walked with him. I mean, it's just it's flabbergasting. And obviously Cahir again had the initial brilliant piece on it, but Michael Foley just builds on it again, and I think is it his piece or is it Mark O'Shea's? One of them just contrast Donegal, I suppose, to Louth. And I know it's easy to pick out Louth because everything is going well results-wise at the moment. But the point is that the reason things are going well results-wise is because everything is being done correctly away from the pitch. And that's, like, can you imagine Peter Fitzpatrick, who, when it was up in Dundalk, you would have heard a huge amount of talk about Peter Fitzpatrick and what an unbelievable job he was doing. And again, he seemed to be a guy who, I won't say universally liked, but universally applauded almost. Even people who there was a begrudging disrespect from some quarters for him up there, as you can often get with people who ruffle feathers and stuff like that. Like, there is no way under Peter Fitzpatrick's watch the likes of a guy like Carl Lacey would have been allowed to get away. You look at the senior setup, it looked like they had a scenario where they had potentially a ticket of Rory Kavanagh being assisted by Jim McGuinness and Michael Murphy, possibly, and they managed to make a hames of that. And it's just flabbergasting how, and it can only be politics. Like, if you just put at the centre of this what is best for the players, both at academy level, and what is best for the players, both in terms of the Donegal senior team, I mean, there's a very obvious outcome and a very clear way of doing things. And yet it hasn't happened in either case. Why?
In Mick Foley's piece in the Sunday Times, the headline is "Despair around Donegal reflects going crisis." This isn't the most important issue, but I suppose it speaks volumes as well. So it's just funny if it wasn't so serious. When Donegal County Board called for a snap meeting last Tuesday for a Thursday night, they kept the agenda simple: the Donegal Academy, and a message on Wednesday added meat to the bones, noting that the meeting was intended to address the recent media scrutiny. And so they decided to have this meeting behind closed doors. They wanted it absolutely private. But placing a seal on the door isn't enough anymore. What transpired, writes Mick, was the leakiest 4-hour in-camera meeting in the history of the genre. Blow-by-blow accounts appeared all evening on social media like a live blog. By Friday morning, there was a rough transcript of the meeting doing the rounds. Most of the newsworthy items were reported by lunchtime. If the board continue their policy of keeping the media out, they might have to borrow from the old Jim McGuinness playbook and ask every delegate to deposit their mobile phone in a bag before the meeting begins. So, again, not the most important issue, but when it rains it pours.
Well, I'm reminded of what we just talked about with the Joe Schmidt file. Could you keep going? The criticisms of the media were familiar. The Irish News for an in-depth report on the collapse of the academy. Orty and Sean Gaviner for describing Donegal as shambolic on League Sunday that weekend. And Joanne Cantwell for apparently letting him.
Yeah, I like that. What you meant to do? No, don't say it, Sean.
But again, it's highlighted again, like, so you've got all that spinning out from Donegal, and the two people that Mark O'Shea compares it to, or contrasts, as I should say, with, are, as I've said, are Peter Fitzpatrick and Louth, and obviously Dublin, because again, they just seem to always have their house in order, and John Costello is just, I mean, how I look at the FAI and, John Delaney leaving, how Gary Keegan or John Costello wasn't brought in there. I really, really don't know, in some capacity, whatever capacity. But how the hell have Dublin managed to keep Stephen Cluxton under wraps like this, and yet we have every single word of a meeting that went on up in Donegal? Look, I just it's absolutely all over the place. Particularly, as I say, the academy side of it just makes but it does appear that I think they are going to have to get him back. I do think he will come back. I think there's that much pressure on them now, and they've been backed into that much of a corner. And the statement they released, I think he will end up back.
Here are my list of demands, Donegal County Board.
Well, fair play to him. List them. Go for it.
You absolutely can. Story which I suspect went under the radar, given that there is so much going on in various sports over the last week or so, surrounds World Athletics in particular. So this is David Walsh, back page of the Sunday Times. World Athletics have declared its position on 3 contentious issues. So they've banned transgender athletes from women's competitions. They have retained the ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes, and they have tightened the rules relating to differences in sex development athletes. The most famous, I suppose, being Caster Semenya. So now, and I mean, in a way, Caster Semenya spent her life in and out of courtrooms, winning a decision, then that decision being overturned, then going back in and winning a decision, and then it being overturned and winning a decision. And now we're at another juncture, which again I have no doubt will be appealed, but World Athletics says that DSD athletes must lower their testosterone level to 2.5 nanomoles per litre, and we'll see where that goes. Again, it doesn't feel like we've ever reached an end point on that particular toing and froing. On the general reportage of the story, he notes that the New York Times reported the ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes, strangely, without mentioning the ruling on transgender athletes. Most other news outlets considered the ban on transgender athletes the most important decision, whilst also referring to the positions of on Russia and DSD athletes. So Walsh charts the thinking. He, talks about how Russia see the Olympics as very important. Obviously hosted the Winter Olympics, and they see it as a platform to display their national might. The Olympics matter to Russia. He concludes his piece without going into his thinking, although to be fair, he probably has done it in more depth in the past. But he just says on all 3 issues, World Athletics has got it right. So, yeah, you may well have missed that. That's World Athletics. And the swimming body as well have joined World Athletics in these rulings. So FINA, swimming's world's governing body, have said athletes from those same countries won't be allowed to compete. So they won't be in the athletics or in the pool. So effectively, nowhere of any value to Russia, really. You picked this piece out, Andy?
Yeah, for a similar reason as I think you might have spotted the same thing. If you look at the first and last lines of this article, Walsh starts by saying World Athletics has declared its position on these 3 issues, but it ends up with Walsh declaring his position very clearly. He's saying they've got it right. That's interesting to me because I think, okay, we would, I think, mostly say, okay, Russia and Belarus not competing is something we probably think is okay for the reasons you mentioned earlier. But then when we get into transgender, that's something which, as a society, we're still dealing with. I think the balance of rights is a very, very delicate issue. It's mentioned in the piece as well, but with regard to the DSD athletes, which is just fundamentally different to transgender.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about transgender, we haven't just mentioned it here. Anyone who hasn't read the piece, it's the new position is that an athlete, writes Walsh, who goes through male puberty, will make physiological gains that may not be neutralised by a hormone suppressant. Though it might sound like a huge change as in banning such athletes, it's not. Asked how many athletes would be affected by the stricter policy, a WA World Athletics spokesperson replied that there are no transgender athletes competing internationally. So again, it's very important, I think, when we are talking about these issues, they can get conflated. They're different. People like Caster Semenya were brought up as women. They are women. They just have a very different way that their body has developed. I suppose I have no firm view on this, and that's why I'm fascinated that Walsh has it. That's not to say he's got it wrong, by the way.
No, sure, I accept that point. Yeah, the DSD athletes is incredibly complex. None of us understand the science there. We just don't. And like I said, I feel very sorry that Semenya's been in and out of courtrooms across her entire career. and I suspect that's going to continue. As for the transgender issue, I think, Shane, the last time you were in the paper review,
football, wasn't it? Was it the LGFA or who were
yes,
talking
that's
about,
right.
wasn't it? Taking a stance on it.
We talked about it at length. I think what we can certainly say is that, and Walsh makes the point as well, positions across sport are hardening towards the banning of transgender athletes. That seems to be the growing trend, and that's where we are for the foreseeable.
I think the going through puberty is going to be going through male puberty is going to be a line which, because it is quite black and white, is going to be seen as easy to draw for people both in the sport and looking on, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah. Ross Tucker's been on the show explaining it at length, and he strongly says, look, the science on this is simple, but the wider conversation about, well, what's sport is and who it should be for is more complicated conversation. But he says the science is not even that complicated to get your head around.
Can I pick up the Russia point? Because there's a good piece in the Observer today by Jonathan Liu talking about Russia, what they're doing now in football. Okay, Russia are persona non grata in terms of European football, so they are playing Iran, they're playing Iraq. They have entered, they've signed up to play in the inaugural Central Asian Championship in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan this summer. It's a very interesting piece because no matter what we might think here, Russia is still trying to get games. There's a number of different angles here. One of them is, yes, they want to see their team playing. It's a very good way to go rah-rah-rah, to fill stadiums with the national colours. But also, they don't want to lose their players. If the players stop getting games as well, that's very important. They could absolutely have a player exodus. But it's a good piece, recommended if you have the Observer today.
And I presume FIFA have banned Russia, haven't they?
Have FIFA banned Russia? I don't know about FIFA, but UEFA certainly have.
UEFA certainly have. I just wonder,
would FIFA really ban anyone if they wanted to?
I think they have. Like, they weren't at the World Cup. They have banned them. I didn't get a chance to read that Lou piece, but I was just wondering under, like, who's sanctioning those games?
Good luck finding the game on television or tracking down a match report on the FIFA website, but seamlessly, almost imperceptibly, Russia has returned to the international football treadmill.
And who are they playing, did you say?
They've played Iran. A diplomatically fitting result, a 1-1 draw.
Is this like the pariahs of geopolitical discourse playing each other in football, their own mini competition?
Seems to be. Yeah. But Russia on manoeuvres, as he says.
Next fixture, Saudi Arabia, is it?
Yeah, it's a good piece.
I hadn't spotted that. Any final bits or pieces people would like to mention?
I suppose just a general overlook of the Premier League and the run into the Premier League, which one of the papers is it? The Telegraph, I think, was saying that it's potentially the most exciting.
Jonathan Northcroft did it, and
Jonathan Northcroft, that's right.
He did a great job because this is, Premier League coverage is so saturated and so everywhere. But he says that this season is like no other, and so he says it's going to be the first in which the English top flight clubs have played matches relating to the same campaign across 12 consecutive months, beginning with the Community Shield last July, ending with the FA Cup final on the first Saturday of June. So for 12 months of the last year, English top flight football has been available to you. Shane Keegan nods, glowing. Yeah. But that's not all. There's been a striker like no other, Erling Haaland, who, if he stays fit, maintains his form, will, says Jonathan Northcroft, obliterate Andy Cole's record of 34 goals in the Premier League season. Spending like no other season, 600 million sterling in 2 transfer windows, and then 9 Premier League sackings. So we are one short of the overall record for sackings in a season, with nearly 30% of games to be played. So in all sorts of ways, this season is throwing up a bunch of interesting things. The relegation situation is nuts. The amount of points separating Crystal Palace.
4 points separating the bottom 9, Joe, which is and that obviously is the reason why we have seen so many sackings, and we'll see a few more to come yet as well, that's for sure. But it's a tremendously interesting run in. Look, there are really only 3 things that people care about, and that's who's going to get relegated, who's going to qualify for the Champions League, and who's going to win the league title, and all of those are very, very much still to be decided. I think we have genuine races for each of those. I still think City might reel in Arsenal, but I think it's going to be fascinating to see if they can. With every passing week, it looks more and more like I'll be proven wrong, I suppose. The race for the Champions League is the race nobody wants to win, obviously.
True.
So that's a different kind of race. Can any of them get their act together in time? But yeah, I just think the relegation situation is absolutely crazy. I have seen situations before where, you know, it could go up as far as 12th to 13th, still not being safe. But usually the bottom one, if not bottom two, are done.
Yeah.
And it's just one team, you know, that last one. But literally at this moment in time, the team sitting in 12th could finish 20th. Like, they could absolutely finish in 20th position, which is crazy and is going to lead, unfortunately, to a couple more seconds, I would think, before I think fellas who've been sacked and been replaced may yet be sacked again, if that makes that makes sense. Things are so heated down there.
Sure, these lads getting sacked, it's like winning the lotto. They go home.
Yeah.
Pop the champagne. We just made 6 million.
Well, listen, Joe, I think I might have mentioned it before. It's when I did the UEFA Pro license, we were, you know, given some very good advice that the day you sit down to negotiate your contract as a manager, don't worry about the length of contract. You hear this sometimes, such and such has got a 5-year contract. That means absolutely nothing. The only thing that matters is, lads, can we agree on what happens the day you sack me? The day you sack me, how much money are you going to give me? Over what period of time is it going to be paid out? And that's all that matters, because that is how 9 out of 10 of these relationships finish.
And what's your sense of how many managers, if they have 2 years left on their Premier League contract, are being paid 2 years?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, over in England, I think they have it fairly well nailed at this moment in time.
They'll get their full package.
They'll get their full package.
It's a great day to be sacked.
Yeah. A little bit different in the League of Ireland, as you can imagine. I went in to be sacked. Well, it all depends on your negotiating power. I would have gone in to get sacked at a previous club, and as it was very well put to me, Shane, here's what you're entitled to. Here's 0. So let's have a chat about where we're going to meet in terms of those two opposite ends of the scale.
And is your reply not, well, if I'm entitled to that, I'll take that?
Yeah, and I suppose ordinarily what might happen is they'll say, well, let's go into a legal battle over it and try and scare the daylights out of you and try and yeah, the bit of wiggle room I would have had is often they might need the manager to sign a non-disclosure, and if that's the case, you don't sign the non-disclosure until they sign something saying they're going to pay you in full.
You've just broken your non-disclosure now.
I'm well out the other side of it, thankfully, by now.
Anything else?
A couple of pieces, yeah. In the Times, there's a new book out called And a Bang in the Years by a lad called Phil Quinlan, written with Steve O'Rourke. It's a guy who got at 16, he got a bad brain injury that no one picked up at the time when it happened, but it's a story of his life since then. Mick Foley's got a good piece in the Sunday Times, just talking to Phil
what
and
sport?
Describing the book. It was in football.
Oh, right.
In football. So he was concussed, he was in a coma, 1 in 4 chance of survival, but again, no one noticed anything serious at the time, but he's had chronic pain since then. He's reduced movement along one side of his body, but he now works for the last 17 years in a special care unit attached to St Mary's Special School in Navan, helping kids with profound disabilities. There's a lovely ending to the piece from Mick Foley. He said he thinks of a child he looked after whose first anniversary occurred last weekend. He was 11 years of age, he says. He never spoke, never ate, never walked. We had to be his voice on these recording devices, so we'd record a message on it. He taps it with his head to communicate. His mother came in to collect him one morning, so we recorded my Joe saying, "I love you, Mammy." And the guy started belting his head off the device. His head must have been red raw. She burst out crying.
I bet.
It's a nice piece. I haven't read the book. I look forward to it.
Okay.
Paul Rowan's piece with Graham Stack is mad. Absolutely.
Oh, go on. Give us the elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch. During his time at the Arsenal Academy under Liam Brady, Graham Stack was remanded for 1. Selling stolen Gucci gear out of the back of a Citroen Saxo to youth and first team players. He remembers Brady leaning out of the window and shouting at him, "This is Arsenal Football Club, not Camden Market." 2.
There's obviously a gap in the market he spotted.
Must be. Crashing the team bus and smashing the windscreen, leaving the official driver with a bloodied face. 3. Dipping his head in an ice bucket for more than a minute to win £200 off senior pros Ray Parler and Fernie Jeffers. And he also jumped off the Wolves team coach in a traffic jam on the motorway and stole a ride on a Harley that was on a pickup truck. There's darker stuff in there as well. They do touch on he was charged with rape while on loan arson at Millwall, he continued to play at the time. That would probably be different now.
No,
Very different.
certainly.
He was acquitted of all charges. But it goes everywhere, this piece. It's worth a read.
Okay. Fellas, we're out of time. Thank you so much for going through the papers for us this afternoon. Shane Keegan, Cobh Ramblers, will miss Ireland's match tomorrow at training, but thank you very much for coming in. Andy McGeady, pleasure. Appreciate it. We're going to take a short break. We will update you on all the GAA action in just a moment and chat to Paddy Andrews, who's at Croke Park.
The Sunday Papers on